Welcome to the Joe Cohen Show. Join me as I share my experience with biohacking and invite top health experts to explore the latest technology, supplements, research, and resources for optimizing your body and brain. Hey everyone, I'm here with James Schmachtenberger, who is a successful serial entrepreneur with a lifelong focus using business and innovation to effect large-scale change for the benefit of humanity. He is the founder of and CEO of Neurohacker Collective, a company focused on making groundbreaking products for health and well-being through complex system science. His areas of expertise include nootropics, anti-aging and regenerative medicine, sleep, and fast-paced entrepreneurialism. He's been biohacking for a long time. How long have you been biohacking, James?
Since before it was called biohacking, since like my late teens, early 20s. So over 20 years at this point.
20 years. Okay. So it's the same here. How old are you now?
I just turned 40 a few months ago.
Okay.
So
and
I
20 years old.
Biohacking like 17, 18 years old.
Right. And you were taking supplements from, what was your first supplements?
A lot of the stuff that I started early was like around adrenal health. I had a lot of adrenal issues in my like late teens, early 20s. So I was doing all kinds of supportive herbs around that, and mostly supplements for being able to improve energy and cognitive function. Because I had a lot of adrenal issues, those were things that I struggled quite a lot with in those days.
So what did you start with? What was your approach?
Yeah, I don't remember in terms of the exact supplements. One of the first like biohacky things that I did pretty early on was doing NAD IVs.
Oh, and you did that 20 years ago?
Yeah, I did my first NAD IVs when I was either 20 or 21.
Wow.
So this was like way before this was a thing. You couldn't do it in the US at the time. I had to go down to Mexico.
Okay.
It was like this little hole in the wall clinic. It was, I think, one of maybe 2 or 3 places in the world that had it at the time.
Okay.
And I didn't even know what it was. I just had heard really good things about the doctor who had been doing the treatments. And I was a couple of years into running my first like larger company, and it just burned out terribly. My adrenals were failing. I couldn't really focus, had very little energy. And so I ended up going down, and I did 3 days in a row of very high dose intravenous NAD, and it was a game changer. Like that experience, that was actually a big part of what drove me into what eventually became Neurohacker, because up to that point I had already tried all kinds of different like healthy diets. I tried exercise programs. I'd done various supplementation and like things that helped, but nothing had been drastic. And like those 3 days, it was a life-changing type of an experience. It was like I went in feeling exhausted, depressed, barely able to focus. And by the end of the 3 days, I was like filled with energy. My brain function was probably better than I had ever experienced it before. The depression had got replaced with motivation, and just everything improved. Like my senses improved. My vision got clearer. My hearing got crisper. And so it was actually that experience. I was like, this needs to be available to people at a massive level, because like most people aren't going to go spend the kind of money I did, go to some seemingly shady little clinic in the middle of nowhere. Like it was clear that really epic things existed, but they weren't readily accessible. And that was...
How long did that effect last for?
Years. Probably at least...
You're saying from that one IV it lasted for years? That's incredible.
Yeah, at the time there wasn't NAD testing available, so I don't know what my baseline numbers were going in. I suspect that they were probably really low, which is why I saw so much benefit. Because I've seen lots of people do NAD IVs at this point, and everyone that I've seen has a good effect. Not everyone has a totally life-changing effect like that.
Okay.
So I suspect that my numbers were pretty bad.
But I feel like the numbers shouldn't change for that long, meaning I feel like it should be, okay, you get a boost for a week and then it goes back to baseline.
That's kind of what I would have suspected, but that wasn't my experience. I think
maybe it just got you out of a certain funk, and then you felt better, you got more energy, you just got into a different pattern.
That was definitely part of it. Was like there was a lot of things I wanted to be doing for my health at that point, and I just didn't have the energy to do them. And
Mhm.
once I did the NAD, all of a sudden I had a bunch of energy. And so coming off of that, I started exercising more. I cleaned up my diet more. I started focusing more on self care in general. And so
Okay.
probably the fact
Ah,
that
I
it
see.
sustained so long was that there was a number of other changes that got implemented, but they were changes that, even though I'm someone who generally has a pretty high degree of willpower, like I was just so wiped that I couldn't make it happen. And that
Okay.
kind of gave me the boost necessary to make the other changes. But yeah,
Okay,
that
so
was probably one of my first like big biohacking experiments that really set me on a lifelong path after that.
what kind of framework do you use in order to understand if something is working for you?
There's different ones. Like I do a fair amount of lab testing. And so like with
Okay.
certain things, I'm looking at my labs over the course of time and seeing how different biomarkers are improving. That's obviously one of the most objective, clear ways of doing it. But there's a lot of things that I've done that either I haven't done the testing or they wouldn't necessarily show up as clearly in biomarkers as they do in just how I feel. So for me, a lot of it is actually just tracking the quality of my life experience. And some of
Mhm.
that is in a structured way. Like I do tend to take an obscene amount of notes. People in my life make
Okay.
fun of me that everything is a spreadsheet, like
Okay.
because I will like track all the supplements I'm taking, what I'm eating, and what I notice after X amount of time on different
Okay.
ones. And I'll sit and I'll write up assessments of what's going on in different parts of my health, and then look after 3 months and see how much those things have changed from whatever new things I implemented. So some of it I do very formally. A lot of it's just at a kind of feeling level.
Do you do
And
mega dosing experiments where you take a large dosage to see more acutely if something is impacting you?
yeah, not always, but it's definitely something that I've done
Okay. So
many
that's another
times.
method. I feel
Yeah.
just long term, you take notes, you try to get a general sense. Is this working? Is it not? And then lab testing, and then maybe some mega dosing. That's a general approach.
Yeah, I've gotten a little bit more cautious as the years have gone on around megadosing. It's still a thing I
Okay.
do, but I do it more thoughtfully than I used to. Because like
You got
before, I
some
would
bad
just hear,
experiences from it?
yeah, not necessarily things that are like super bad for me, but I remember probably 15 years or so ago, I had been reading some stuff about how good niacin is for you. And I was like, oh, if it's good at 50 milligrams, it's got to be better at 1,000, right? And so
Okay.
I
And what
took
happened?
1,000, but just massive flushing syndrome, right? You've
Okay, but
probably
that's
had
not
a
long term
nice,
though. I've taken up to 2,000 milligrams a day.
right. No, it wasn't like a long term messed me up, but like I had,
Okay.
4 or 5 hours where I just couldn't be in my own skin. Like I was so hot, everything was bright red and itchy. And I was like, please just let this be over. Um,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
No, yeah, I
No, but I've,
never.
I've also
Yeah.
done things that did have a little bit more detrimental effect because a lot of my health issues in my earlier life were around lack of like energy. There were a number of times, like when I first got into nootropics, for instance, I just started mega dosing a lot of the strongest stuff that was available,
Like
and
what?
like all the racetams.
I never did well with any of those rat stamps.
I love
I just,
racetams.
I know. Yeah, personally, I just never did well with that. I don't know why it just doesn't work for me, but
Yeah,
and so you liked it, and then you took more. You're like, okay, let me get more of this stuff.
yeah. I took enough of some of those that it started to put me into just like a really anxious, jittery state where even though I was hyper focused and like super productive, I was not enjoying life. Yeah, everything
Okay.
felt like it was had to be handled this instant, and it was going to be like catastrophic if I didn't. Um,
Okay.
so those were things that I noticed in terms of my own feeling level. But then I also got outside feedback. Like I remember in the very, very early days of Neurohacker, before we had actually built it as a company, we were just doing like research and a bunch of experimentation. Myself and the other two founders had been like experimenting with all of the different racetams and modafinil and just like pretty high doses. And in one way, it was awesome because the amount of work that we were getting done was just incredible. But we didn't, like, at least I didn't realize I was moving at such a fast pace that I started getting frustrated with everyone around me that wasn't moving at that kind of a pace.
Hmm.
And basically, all of our girlfriends at the time came and did an intervention. So the three of us co-founders were sitting in office, just like hammering workout, and our three girlfriends walked in and they're like, "Hey guys, we're gonna need you to change what you're doing. We don't know exactly what you're taking, but it's made you assholes, and you
Okay.
just can't do it anymore." And it wasn't like specifically,
Laid off
it
on the
was just,
racetams.
yeah. And I
Okay.
still use some racetams here and there, though not nearly as much as I used to.
Okay. What do you take? What's your go-to?
In terms of racetams, I would say my favorite overall is probably New Peps.
New Pep. That seems like most people's favorite these days.
It's a really good one. It does so much for brain function, for like clarity, for energy, but it doesn't tend to push into the anxious kinds of
Mm,
states that some of the other ones can. So that one I like a lot. And I would say aniracetam is another one that I'm a big fan of. Because that
okay.
one also does a fair amount in terms of mental clarity, but it's actually an anxiolytic. So
Okay.
it provides this really like calm, gentle, like focused type of energy. For the most part, nowadays I do Qualia Mind, the nootropics that we've developed, and that's like my baseline. But then I will add things to that on certain days, depending on what type of work I'm doing. So
Okay.
if there's a day where, particularly if I've got to do a lot of finance work, because I hate doing finance work, then those would be days where I would add some racetams in. And it's like the focus just cranks up so much that it overrides the fact that I don't want to be doing the thing. And it makes it easy to just
Okay.
flow through the work.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what do you what's the mechanism of these racetams? I'm curious why they don't work for me. I guess I looked into it a while ago, but is it the AMPA receptors?
Generally speaking, they're depending on which racetam, they're either predominantly focused on ramping up dopamine, acetylcholine, or glutamate, and sometimes more than one. And with those things, people are going to respond differently based on where your starting point is. Right? If you're someone who's already high in acetylcholine and you start ramping it up more, it's actually going to be counterproductive. And
Right, but the
racetams are
thing is,
very
I guess where
strong.
you ramp up dopamine is an important factor. I
Right.
guess it's in certain places because certain ways of increasing dopamine work for me, certain others don't. So I feel
Right.
like that's probably a relevant factor. Do you want to hear about the one health hack that is sure to change your life? Okay, here it is. Subscribing to this podcast. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping to keep us ad-free. Let's talk about what methods, in terms of lab tests, you're looking at that you're tweaking and you're seeing results. Okay, I took this and this changed. Where do you see, what do you want to move in the right direction? What have you been working on and moving in the right direction? And
Right.
what have you seen work for those things?
Like over the last few years, one of the things that I've been tracking more are different inflammatory markers because I have some type of underlying G issue that tends to create a lot of inflammatory issues. And I've done piles of lab testing to try to figure out what the thing is and haven't been successful. So then I'm just looking at what are the effects of it. A few like close friends who are some of the top physicians in these spaces. I'm like, okay, here's what's going on. Tell me what labs to run, tell me how to interpret the labs, and then
Okay.
we'll do various changes and then go back and do it again. And some of it I know, but I like personally, I've spent a lot more of my life studying in the domains of personal development, different aspects of
Mm,
psychology, philosophy. Like that's been my area. And that was actually a big driver for moving into this space was that both in myself and in a lot of people, I saw that people spent a lot of time suffering in like psycho-emotional ways, some of which was driven by early childhood trauma and bad circumstances, but some of it was also driven by health issues. And where a lot of my focus, particularly early in my career, was more on the psychology side, I just saw a lot of people doing so much work trying to get to a healthier place, trying to feel better, and hitting up against walls because their body was working against them. And that became a real driver. I was like, look, if we can help people be able to take away some of the primary physiological drivers of feeling depressed, anxious, overwhelmed, whatever the things are, then the psycho-emotional work actually becomes far easier and more attractive. So that's more my direct area of expertise. This is an area that I've learned a lot over the years, but never really gone super deep into some of the research because I happen to be really fortunate to both be friends with a lot of the best people and now have a whole team of researchers in my company. So I end up shortcutting a lot of times.
Yeah, no, everybody has to pick like which you have to shortcut things in life, right? If you really go deep into everything, then you're not going to have time to do anything. So everybody has to pick what they want to really go into. One of the things I felt, and this is like my own perspective, is that I just didn't trust anybody in terms of what they had to say about my health. Meaning,
Well,
like,
that's fair.
I'll trust, I'll delegate a lot, but my health is one of the only things I don't delegate. And I'm very skeptical that anybody else knows better. I'll listen to people, but
Right.
one of the things I realized is a lot of experts, the vast majority, if not all of them, are really, they use their own body as the centerpiece of what to advise other people. And instead of data, which is why you've been in the industry for many years, I've been here in the industry for many years. You go to one doctor and all they're involved with is like mold and Lyme disease or
Right.
whatever. And either that doctor had Lyme disease or mold disease or one of them, and now they think everybody has it. And so you
Right.
go in, they do a test, and lo and behold, whoa, you're positive, right? And then it's, wait, how many? I want to see the data. So I'm the type of person who would be like, let me see the data of all of your patients, and I want to see what percentage were positive and negative on this test. And something tells me that there would be like a 99% positivity rate. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I'm just cynical, but that's,
I think your approach
yeah.
is actually the right approach. I think that health is one of the most important things that people should take self-responsibility around and not just put trust in others. And I do a lot of that. Like I maybe overstate how much I lean on people, but I'm also in a unique position where I don't tend to have to rely on a single doctor where they have their own biases, right? Like I'll go and talk to 3 or 4 experts and then I'll look at where does their feedback all overlap and where their feedback all overlaps. I'm like, okay, this is probably something. Because otherwise, yeah, you go to one physician, it's everything is adrenal issues. And another one,
Right,
everyone has
exactly.
mold, right? And that's totally a thing. And
But you
it's
notice
not
that you'll go to
inaccurate.
somebody who's a specialist in adrenal issues and you go to them, yeah, you've got
Yeah.
adrenal issues, right? You've got these issues.
Well, you see that at the
Yeah,
individual level, and you also see that at the fad level. Because like I've been in the industry long enough that I've seen not just like individual doctors, but the whole industry where it's like, oh, it's all about this right now, and then a year
right.
later, it's all about
You've
the
got
next
leaky
thing.
gut.
Right. Yeah, leaky gut was like what, maybe a decade ago. Everyone had leaky gut. And the thing is, like in most of these cases, they're actually not wrong. It just may or may not be the most important thing for you. Right. Based on a lot of the clinical data that you find, yeah, the majority of people do have leaky gut. The majority of people have adrenal insufficiency. The majority of people have candida overgrowth. And those are all important things to address. They just might not be the most crucial places to start for each individual person. And that's where you need someone either
Yeah, but
me,
it's also
yourself.
like saying everybody's got oxidative stress because everybody breathes. Like, I'm sure there's some
Right.
candida particles in everybody, but yeah, the question is if it's impacting. I don't know if everybody's got Lyme disease, right?
Actually, from my understanding, a lot of the newer research that's come out in the last few years is indicating that Lyme is nearly ubiquitous, more
Well,
so
that
in certain regions than others. And there's obviously varying different degrees of Lyme. And
if that were the case, then the question of is that causing the problems in somebody is less likely to be the case because then everybody's got Lyme. So why are you having one issue and somebody else is having another issue?
Lyme is
Or
sort
some
of an
people don't. Yeah.
interesting, weird one because it causes issues almost everywhere. It is like a fundamental thing where how it presents for one person versus another person may be totally different, though the underlying causation can be the same.
Okay, so let's go down this line, right? How would you test for it? So there's going to be a certain test, and if almost
Mhm.
everybody has it, most people, the results are the test that I'm assuming they're going to do is going to be 90% you're going to have Lyme. Okay. You get that result. Now, what do you do with it? How does that affect treatment?
Right. It may or may not affect treatment at all. Like I remember a decade ago, I was doing a bunch of lab work with a autoimmune Lyme specialist, and it turned out I had 2 Lyme bands that showed up on my lab work.
Okay.
So it wasn't enough to be diagnosed as full bore Lyme, but I had, I guess an easy way to say it would be like low level Lyme. And but we did a bunch of other labs, and it was like there's other stuff happening that's clearly more damaging and more acute, so we're just not even going to pay attention to the Lyme. Whereas like someone
Okay.
who has it quite badly, it can completely wreck your life and absolutely becomes the primary area of focus. But also
So,
how it's treated is different for different people, right? Because Lyme and a lot of autoimmune conditions, a lot of Lyme, like they'll present really differently for different people because they're basically weakening the whole system. And then whatever aspects of your physiology are already predisposed to issues will tend to get worse.
okay.
And so though the underlying causation might be there, oftentimes you actually have to start by treating more where the symptomology shows up just to even have enough health and bandwidth to be able to do more. If you've got
Okay.
really advanced Lyme and been dealing with it for years, you likely don't have the energy to be able to go straight into all of the necessary treatments. So sometimes there's other things just to get to enough of a baseline of health to be able to go deeper.
Okay. So I basically, my approach to health, and there's pros and cons to this, is my baseline assumption is that if I have not seen the research, I don't believe it. And the negatives are that there's been situations where quite a few in the past where I just said I don't see the evidence, and so I didn't believe it. And then it turned out I did see the evidence, and then I believed it. So
Right.
I would put Lyme into that category in the sense that I haven't seen the evidence, and so I'm not on board on that train, just
Mhm.
because I haven't come across that research where, like legitimate papers that show that there's, and maybe you could send it to me. I'd love to see it, but I'm just saying, like, I just want to, like, that's my general kind of approach to health. And there's
Right.
been many things where that's been correct. I think that not buying into certain things has saved me a lot as well. So I guess there's a balance in whether you want more false positive or false negative, right? What do you prefer?
Well,
Because
it's
sometimes
interesting. I
where
think
there's
that
a lack of
approach,
evidence also. Yeah.
I think that approach, personally, I believe it's a really good approach, but I think it's a incomplete approach. Right? It's a very intellectual, like analytical approach to health, and that should be the case for sure. Right? Like you should really value what the clinical data shows and what degree of evidence there is around things. But that's not the entire picture because the whole science community knows that we know very little about human physiology. We know a ton, but it's a small fraction of what will be known, right? And of the stuff that we know, a lot of it's not even correct, right? Give or take 50%, every article that is published in medical journals is then proven to be inaccurate within 10 years. So not only do we not know everything there is to know, but a chunk of what we know is just going to become wrong.
Right.
So using an analytical approach is useful, but it shouldn't be the only thing. I think that using a more like gut or intuitive type of approach is also really crucial
Hmm.
because there are so many things that can be beneficial where they just may not have had the clinical evidence, but there is this sort of like innate intelligence that the body has. And if you learn how to tune into it, it can be incredibly informative. But in the same way, people say,
Yeah.
like, oh, I get a gut feeling about something. It's like you train that ability to be able to start to use it, not just when the gut feeling automatically comes up, but actually be able to lean into that because there's so many things that the mind doesn't have the capacity to factor that the entire system does. Now
So
that's more at an
I
individual level, right?
yeah.
Like for us, like when we're building products for thousands and thousands of people, we are then predominantly doing that off of clinical evidence. Although even there, it is still insufficient, right? Like
Right.
there are certain ingredients that have been used in like TCM or Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years, and just no one has ever funded the clinical studies. But you've got thousands of years and millions of people who have continually reported certain benefits from particular ingredients. And to discredit that because it hasn't been formalized actually doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, so I would like to say that I do take that into account as well. So either I have data or I'll just try something, and if there's some kind of mechanism, which you don't need human studies to have that mechanism, you could have animal studies, you could have sometimes metabolomics, something mechanistic, but usually it would be animal studies. If I have animal studies and then I try it on myself and it works well, or there's some kind of traditional approach, very strong traditional knowledge for something, I can experiment and then see if it works for me. I would say with the Lyme thing, that's a little different because what are you going to try to see if that theory is correct? Right? You're going to go and try antibiotics for a year. That's not a
Yeah.
wouldn't be a wise experiment in my point of view.
No, just like randomly taking antibiotics, not knowing if you need them is not something that I would generally encourage for
Right.
people. And yeah, if you're going to treat Lyme, there are different natural things that you're going to take, but inevitably you are going to end up dealing with pretty high doses of antibiotics for really long periods of time. So for something like that, yeah, I would absolutely
Did you
not
take
go on to it.
antibiotics for a really long time?
No, not for a really long time. Like for Lyme, for instance, most of the time, if people have it to a fairly significant extent, you're talking about being on 2 to 3 different antibiotics for 6 months. I've never done that. I was several years ago, I had done a bunch of lab work and turned out I had Yersinia, which is a bacteria that's part of the same family that was the bubonic plague. Um,
Okay.
and
Doesn't sound
so
fun.
it wasn't the plague, but it was in that same family, and it was definitely causing a bunch of issues. It's
Okay.
causing
And you
all
got
kinds
rid
of
of it?
joint issues, GI issues. Yeah. And like I did the whole natural protocol, which probably was like 8 or 9 different supplements 3 times a day, some dietary changes, but I also did about a month of antibiotics for that.
Okay. And then you noticed it was gone.
Yeah. Yeah. At least it was the levels were at least low enough that they weren't then re-showing up on lab tests. Whether or not there was
Okay.
some there is not known because with a lot of the
And then how did you
plugs,
feel?
there's like a base threshold, notably better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
And that
I'd gone and done
continued
a
over
bunch of
time?
Yeah, yeah. Particularly there, I noticed a lot of benefit in joints.
Okay.
I'd had the propensity for joint tears, and I couldn't
Oh,
figure
wow.
out why. Like there was clearly something systemic going on that made me susceptible, because I had torn shoulders lifting weights and torn, meniscus going on a sprint, and like things that weren't major injuries that should have caused joint tears. And
Okay.
so I went and did, PRP injections and other things to heal the tears. But I also then was like, why do I keep having these issues? And Yersinia ended up being a meaningful part of that. And after that, I still seem to have some susceptibility for joint issues, but a lot less than I used to.
Okay. Interesting. And are you
Yeah.
still working out like a fair bit or?
Yeah. I do weights like 3 days a week. And then other days I'll do other things. I try to get as much of my exercise from sports as I can because they're just more fun.
For sure.
I've never been someone who gets like really excited about spending my time in the gym. Um,
I hate the gym.
the last 6 months or so, I've been really consistent with it. And the thing that's helped me is bringing in the social element. So I basically converted my garage into a gym. And
Mm,
for a number of months, it was sitting there with all this beautiful gym equipment, barely getting used. And I ended up reaching out to some friends who live nearby. And I'm like, hey, I know you've been wanting to work out too, and you're not doing it. How about we set a schedule and do it together? And
okay. I like that.
the accountability piece and the fun of spending time with friends has made it super easy to be totally consistent.
Yeah, what I did, I guess I did a bunch, like I was doing different workouts, some weights, some jogging, some this and whatever, different volleyball. And then I just dropped everything. And now all I do is acro yoga.
I've been seeing online. It looks like you've been doing a lot of acro.
So all my workouts, so either I still ride a bike to the studio and then back. And then if I have to go somewhere, I'll go usually by bike or walking. But besides that, like just my exercise, it's pretty much. And then I try to go to the gym once in a while, like once every 2 weeks now, but it's pretty much just acro yoga. And the reason I do that is because it combines a lot of things that I wanted in one go, right? So number one, there's a social element. And so if you're working out in the gym, you're alone, more or less. Even if you're with a friend, you're not like really working out together, and you're not like, it's not interactive. It's okay,
Right.
you do these weights, I'll do these. So you don't have that social element. And so then you have to fit into your life some kind of social element. So that's an element that, again, it takes off a burden, and I'm just more at peace, just living my life, doing whatever, just being in my own lane. So it's got the social, it's got that touch element, and then it also has flexibility, strength,
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit of cardio, because sometimes you're doing like you do sweat a lot, right? So
Right.
if you're
And it's a
sweating,
nice
there's some
combination of
cardio.
both working major muscle groups for strength, but also working all the balancing muscles.
And then, yeah, exactly. So you're balancing, it's working on balance, mobility, flexibility, and then also
Right.
strength, a little bit of cardio. So it has that combination of everything. Not
Yeah.
necessarily ideal for everything. In the gym also, like I never have to do leg workouts because a lot of it is leg workouts, right?
You're
And
basically
then,
leg pressing people all day.
yeah, you're leg pressing people. I'm doing like it's crazy how much. And then I ride my bike there, so my legs are like getting massive now. I think I gained a few kilos of just leg muscles. And
Nice.
then you're also like pressing, and so you're using your arms, you're using your shoulders, you're lifting people, your biceps, like you're using everything more or less, your back. I feel like, yeah, so you're working a little bit on strength, and then flexibility, you got to straighten your legs. And so it works on everything. And so I guess that's why I'm just like, all right, I found my thing. I'm just going to go with this, and that's that. It's so efficient.
I think that's actually a better approach. Like I think most people, we all know there's these things we're supposed to do for our health, and we try to like force ourselves to become the picture of what we saw someone else doing on Instagram.
That's
But
what I try to do.
if it's
I was
not
like,
your
okay,
natural,
yeah.
I've I spent years guilting myself about why I wouldn't go to the gym. And at a certain point, I'm like, I just don't like doing it. But I will play sports for hours and like pour sweat and push myself hard enough that I'm almost on the verge of vomiting because I like doing it. The thing is fun. And so I'll put so much more effort into it. And some people, they love being in the gym. And for those people, that's awesome. They should totally do it. But I think that a lot of times we psych ourselves out of exercise or other aspects of health as well because the way that we think we have to do it sounds terrible and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, the thing is, it never, for me, exercise, I never had a problem doing it. It's just that I guess I got into this phase where I was following what Peter Attia was saying and some other people, right? Because I never was big in exercise. So that's an area where I didn't know as much as other people. And so I decided, okay, let me try to learn more from these people who have been in it for a while. Peter Attia is one of them. Or some people really hone in on their exercise routines. And I do this, what, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm like doing flexibility day, back day, knee day. Andrew Huberman, I got my ankle day, my leg press, I'm doing flexibility. And I started doing it one by one. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm just working out all day. I gotta do, there's the posture exercise.
There's a huge problem when you start following multiple people and then you're
Right.
like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And that makes sense. And you're like, wait, I'm trying to fit in 14 hours of exercise every
No,
day.
literally, it was like 20 hours of exercise. No, you got to do flexibility. I'm like, okay, I got to do yoga for the half hour a day. Then there's mobility. So there's special mobility training. Like, I'm like, oh, I got to do it a half hour of mobility a day. Then you got to do
Yeah.
weightlifting. Then there's legs, there's back. You can't only work out your arms or your chest, you got to do the whole thing. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my gosh, who has time to do anything else? And so I'm just like, no, it's not working for. And then you got to do the cardio. two hours of zone 2, 3 hours of zone 2 a week, and the zone 4, zone 1. Rucking.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is going on here? I'm just working out for 25 hours a week. I don't have time to do anything else. I'm worn out from working out so much, and then it's got to prepare, then you got to shower after. It's like the whole thing. It's ridiculous.
No, I did that same thing with supplements some years ago, where like I watched a bunch of podcasts from all these people and heard about all these epic supplements, and I went and met with some different doctors, and they were giving me protocols, and I was like, I'm just going to do all of it. And I put it all together. At one point, I was doing over 300 capsules a day. Like, I can't eat. Literally, like every time I sit to take capsules, it's 60 to 80 capsules, and between that many capsules and that much water, I'm like,
a day? Oh my god!
And you would think you would feel amazing, but I'm like, no, I feel nauseous. I can't digest all of it.
Capsules a day, dude. That's hilarious, man.
It was ridiculous.
Literally 300 capsules.
Oh yeah, no, I counted it out.
It was 300. How many?
Yeah, I was taking supplements 5 times a day.
The time.
Yeah, I mean, like my first thing in the morning and my right before bed were like the biggest. Those ones were like close to 100 each, and then the other ones were a little bit smaller, but still, it's a cup of supplements. You're like, and I suck at swallowing pills, right? I can only swallow 2 capsules at a time. So
oh my gosh!
Incredibly time consuming.
It was the whole day you were just chugging pills
all freaking day.
Oh my gosh! I can take 10 down at a time.
Yeah, I've always wished.
But wait, what did you do? And I'm assuming you were taking stuff that wasn't capsules. Also, you were taking powders.
Oh yeah, capsules, tablets, liquids,
and then
powders.
like probably some of them had multiple ingredients. You probably were taking like 400 supplements.
And I don't know why I'd gotten into this weird headspace. I just heard, oh, this thing's great. Okay, I'm gonna get that, and this thing's great. But then I wasn't doing like the next level of research and looking at, 14 of these things have the same ingredient in them. So with some stuff, I'm getting like way more of individual ingredients than my body could actually process.
How did you feel besides nausea?
I just felt weird because it was like, in some ways I felt great, right? Because my body's just getting massive amounts of the best nutrition that you could ever imagine. And so there were ways where I was like super energetic and felt really good, but then I'm like constantly nauseous because it's just not supposed to break down that many fucking capsules. And then also a lot of those things are impacting hormones and other stuff. So I was like emotionally unregulated. So I felt really energetic, but then sometimes I was like super happy, and then all of a sudden I'd be depressed, and then I was really happy, and I was like, all right, this is not working for me.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. You were taking that many stuff. That's got to be like a world record.
I'm kind of surprised you haven't done that.
No, I think the most I've taken is, and I'm still taking it. It's about 150.
That's still a lot, but
and I would say it's not all pills. So the pills are probably over 100. Let me think about that. There's probably like 100 pills, or maybe 120. No, it's probably 120 pills, and then 30 ingredients that are in powders, something like that. And I guess it depends on how you slice it, because some things have more than one ingredient, but then sometimes you take more than one pill. Yeah. But the thing is, I did notice, so I do very comprehensive lab tests, and I told you, I don't trust anybody. And I think that's one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I have a couple approaches, right? Number one is I rely very heavily on software. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have to rely heavily on software. And that was a huge game changer for me. So there's different kinds of software that I relied heavily on. One is genetics. So you could see, with genetics, you could see a whole bunch of stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I started Self-Decode. And then also why we have labs in Self-Decode is because I realized how important labs are, right? The main technology is in genetics, but there's some features in the labs. And I realized how important it was. And once I actually started using it, it was a massive game changer. And I'll explain why. Because if you take a lab test 10 years ago, you have no idea what that number is. Unless you have some kind of freak autistic memory, photogenic, whatever. Even I have a really good memory for numbers. And you can ask me, what's your number for a random lab test? I'll tell you. And I could even tell you numbers over time. Like I've got pretty good memory when it comes to numbers and stuff.
Right.
And so I can tell you these numbers, but even because I'm testing 300 lab markers at a time, and I've been testing lab markers for 11 years already and saving them. So it's not only tested, I've tested before, but I didn't save it. And so I realized 11 years ago, this is really important. I got to start taking tests and saving them.
What
But then you
software do
don't
you
see
use
the
for
trend.
tracking over duration? Are you just
I'll show
showing
you.
them?
Yeah, I'll show you. And I'll show you why it's a game changer. It'll be pretty clear once I show you. It's hard to explain really without seeing it, but I'll show you. So here's my lab markers. And you could just type in any lab marker, right? So the genetic stuff it gives me a lot of directions about where to go. But so let's say I look at homocysteine. Okay. You could see every time I checked homocysteine since June 2012.
Nice.
And it gives you the range, and then you can click on each one, and it gives you how to get it in the optimal range, essentially. And then it also, when we have the recommendations, it also updates the recommendations to take into account these labs, and it shows you exactly how it does that. But just looking at just one game changer with using software was looking at the trends. Okay. I would not be able to leaf through 20 PDFs and figure out what the hell is going on. Control F and where's this PDF? Where's that PDF? See, it just would be too crazy. Once I had this, all of a sudden, and I have it for every marker, right? All of a sudden, I could see, hey, wait a second, my homocysteine's going up. And by the way, one of the reasons why my homocysteine went up is because I actually started exercising. And it turns out that if by exercising, you take up a lot of methyl groups, you use a lot of methyl groups. And so that actually increased my homocysteine. And this is despite taking in a lot more methyl groups. It's just that either if you're sick so in this case, you see it was 32, I'm able to see that this was because I got sick at this state. And this was also because I had
with your software here, does it give you the opportunity to put in like when you got sick or when you did certain medical interventions, so you can also see correlations?
You could take notes if on this page. You could put in a note. It doesn't necessarily take into account that information that you put in, but you could put in a note and see. But I just remember that, and sometimes I'll put in notes, but I remember that in these two cases, one case I was fighting infection, but I wasn't sick. But I know I was fighting infection because I actually felt like I was fighting it. But then I realized, at this point already, I thought, yeah, I'm completely better. Meaning, like it was like a couple hour thing where I felt like, my body's like a little weird. It's fighting something, and then the next day I was completely fine. And I actually delayed taking this test a little because I wanted to see how I felt. And then I thought here I was actually better. But let me show you a cool trick I learned by how to tell if you're sick. The one marker that always is abnormal when you're sick is iron. So far, right? Like the most reliable. So these times I was battling an infection.
I've never actually heard that correlation before.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you can see my iron is like within the normal range, except in all the times that I was fighting an infection. So this time it was like a cold, and I took the test twice, and you could see that twice it was abnormal. Here I was normal. The PDF that I got was just like, okay, it lists a whole bunch of different markers, but you can't pay attention to all these things. And then when you see it in the graph here, you're like, wait a second, this makes sense. I was fighting the infection. Boom. And then you see it went back to normal in November 4th and November 9th. And this is the most accurate.
I don't think I know anyone else that tests as often as you do.
Yeah, I
got
don't
like at
think
least
so
one or
either.
two a month going on here. It's impressive.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of testing because I've been realizing that for me to be on the cutting edge, I don't think most people need to do it, but I'm actually trying also to discover new things and really like figure out how to design the software in a better way, so that, meaning like everything I learn and all the research that comes together, we put into the software. so that the
Right.
software gets smarter. And then
That's
just,
one of the cool things
yeah.
is, when you've got this data across large numbers of people and you get to do the meta-analysis, then you get to start to identify patterns that people haven't known before, and not only advance testing, but just advance generally what we understand about causation.
Yeah.
This is really
And
cool. I hadn't actually seen this, but yeah, being able to do labs like this over time and very quickly and easily be able to see the trends,
yeah, and
that's
there's another thing that
great.
we have here with suggested labs. So it actually tells you which labs you should get based on your
Mhm.
genetic risks. So you could see, for
Nice.
example, let's say, why is this being recommended? And you could click on each of these things. So this means I have a genetic risk, these
Mhm.
topics. And you could see for each of these things how this lab would influence that. So let's say a CMP includes a calcium test. Genetically higher levels of calcium is causally associated with increased risk for chronic pancreatitis, and there's a reference there. So it's like I would not be able to compute all. There's no way I would be able to compute all this data in trying
Right.
to think, okay, what lab test should I get, or what lab test should somebody else get? You have all these topics. Each of these has references, and then you look at how many things this can actually tell you, which your doctor is never going to tell you.
Right.
And however smart all of your professionals are, they can't replace what software can do in a certain way. And that's the magic of software. And you want
The
to
amount of
combine
data
those.
that a software can process is just inherently going to be more than any individual, no matter how good they are.
Yeah, and also, by the way, if you ever, let's say, if you're ever want to find out how a supplement interacts with your genetics or labs, you could either type in any supplement, or you could look at
Mhm.
any supplement, and it's going to show you which labs it's helping. Let's say curcumin in this case, it's helping with my lipoprotein A, fasting glucose, and here it means that it was suboptimal in the past, and it's helping with these, right? And then, and it's also helping with my
Now, it
hemoglobin
doesn't necessarily
A1C.
know that's what helped with these. It just knows that those got better and that
Yeah,
curcumin
those got better. So it's
is.
just listing them because it was saying that at some point in the past, these were suboptimal. So if you look at, let's say, HbA1c here, you're going to see that at some points in the past, it was suboptimal, like in this case. Okay. Which means that you want to, meaning like it could be suboptimal again. Now, at this point, it's optimal, but that's because I'm doing things. It's not randomly, right? But so
Right.
what is all the labs that it's helping with, and then all the genetic risks. You can see that, and then you could click on each one, and you see how it helps by aiding these different risks, right? So that's the software piece that I was talking about. Where number one is I use software to combine lots of data and kind of prioritize what makes sense for me, and then
Right.
also check up if I see a new supplement, I could see, okay, does this make sense? And that has been quite helpful because you look at all your personalized data in one shot and it allows you to see it very clearly. And then the other sense, also just looking at my labs, like you saw in one table and seeing, okay, what's happening. And then you could click on each one, it goes to its own page, but you can clearly see where is it going.
I mean, one of the things about this that I love so much is that if done correctly, it's very empowering for people. Because I think one of the places where people tend to get stuck a lot in their health is that they've got whatever symptoms going on that are making them feel bad, but they don't know what's happening. And therefore, they don't have a sense that I can do something about it. And so, yeah, you might experiment with a couple of things here and there, but there's not really that sense of clarity of, oh, this is happening likely because of this. And that's something that I can actually address. And so when you start to get into these types of dynamics where you are running labs, where you are tracking, it both, I think it can take a lot of the fear and anxiety around health issues away because you start to have more of an understanding of what's happening. And it's not just this, and it then gives you a path to actually be able to do something to make a real change.
Yeah,
And over time, be able to see if those changes are working or if adjustments are needed. It's going to be huge on joints, but I don't know if, have you tried our senolytic product before?
maybe. What does it have in there?
It's 9 different senolytic compounds. The highest dose ones would be quercetin and fisetin.
Okay.
But we actually just about 2 weeks ago, we just published a clinical trial on that. product, looking at a bunch of things, but one of the core areas that we were looking at was joint health, because senescent cells are known to pool up in joint tissue. And the results were stunning. We saw a 68% reduction in joint discomfort after people took the product 3 times. And I've noticed that for
Interesting.
myself as well, because joints has also been like one of my underlying. And I've been on that product for a little under a year since we put it out, basically. And my joint issues have gotten drastically better.
So we got quercetin, fisetin, longvita curcumin, olive leaf extract. So I've taken all the ingredients individually,
I would imagine.
and I'll tell you why. And they're all good ingredients, right? So let's be clear. This is looks like a very good product, but I would say that for me personally, I'll tell you what would be some of the potential issues. And this is based on my lab testing. I'm not just saying, but again, all these ingredients are obviously great ingredients, right? And somebody who is not very advanced or is not taking 150 supplements and doing lab testing every 2 weeks, it seems like it's a good product based on the ingredients. But I'll just tell you some of the things that I've learned from some of these individual ingredients and what doesn't work for me. So basically, flavonoids don't really work that well for me because they lower my thyroid hormones. And that would include quercetin, fisetin, luteolin, and yeah, so that would be those would be some examples of, and maybe it's hard to know because they don't really do some of these things are not. I mean, it's not studied on clinical trials or anything like that. It's in animals in high doses they lower thyroid hormones, and one of the negative effects for me taking a lot of supplements was taking of my T3. And so what I did was I went through all of my supplements that I was taking and knocked out any ones that either had clinical trials of lowering T3. And so 2 of them was carnitine and higher doses of niacin. So I was taking about 1,000 milligrams of niacin, but that can lower thyroid hormones. I knocked those out. But even then, I still was like, I looked into everything that could lower thyroid hormones. And some of these things could potentially lower them. Now, again, you could check your thyroid, your T3, and you could see, what level are you at and what level are you at after taking a whole bunch of supplements or different combinations. For me, yeah, just because, and again, these things are obviously have tons of benefits, which is why I've been taking them. Also different ingredients like fisetin, right? That's a big thing in the longevity space now. So like the ingredients, there's no problem with the ingredients. It's just that I think if you're taking a lot of supplements, and I noticed this in some other people. So I've seen in other people who take a lot of supplements, a lot of flavonoids, their T3 tends to be on the lower end. and it's something you want to check.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you would, with this product, I think you would actually have a different experience, because what you're referencing is more related to continuous use of those supplements. So if you're taking high doses of flavonoids all the time, then you could see that.
That's true.
With senolytics, so basically all of the research around getting rid of senescent cells has indicated that what's most effective is what's referred to as the hit and run technique, where you take super high doses periodically as opposed to taking the thing on an ongoing basis. So that's the design of this product, right? Is we've got, as you see, like quite high doses of a number of these things, but you only take it 2 days per month.
Okay.
Do it 2 days again. And with that,
that could be a different story. Yeah, that could be different. I still do certain things like
knock out the senescent cells, but you don't have some of the secondary effects that you would talk about. Or even if you do, if your T3 drops for a day or two a little bit, that's not going to have any material impact. It's more of an issue if that's going for duration.
Yes, that's actually a really good point. I think if you're taking it in that way, I would love to test it, but it's probably not going to have an impact on thyroid hormones. I would say, and I love that you got longvita curcumin. That's one of I've been taking that for 11 years now. So that's been a constant in my regimen.
See, it's going to be different on an individual basis, right? If you get 10 people who all have joint issues, they don't all have them for the same exact reasons. And so being able to do the research and figure out which the right ones are is key. Because yeah, for you, if your body wasn't able to make use of collagen, that's going to be a huge issue. And the senolytics probably would have helped, but not, they wouldn't have fixed it by themselves if that's still there. Whereas like for a lot of other people, it turns out that having a buildup of senescent cells is a primary cause of different kinds of joint issues.
Yeah. What do you do to measure biological age and see if things are working in that regard? Because there's a bunch of clocks and there's different methylation clocks and glycan
I mean, I've done
clocks and this.
I've done different tests before. We just built an NAD product and just did a clinical study on that. And NAD is obviously like a core biomarker associated with. Lately, we've been looking at blood levels of NAD and all those metabolites.
Give me an example of what your levels were and what they are. Like, give me some information about that.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull mine up real quick.
Because I'm curious what you were able to do in that regard. And also, I noticed your product doesn't have any NMN in here. Is that by on purpose or
Yeah, NMN got pulled from the market regulatory wise.
okay? There's
And
still a lot of people selling it though.
there are. We just like we as a company, we don't do anything that isn't clearly allowable from a regulatory perspective. There's all kinds of gray
Okay.
zone stuff. We're as we've gotten bigger, we just try to be fairly cautious. Like when you're a small startup, you can get away with things. And NMN's a great ingredient. When you look at the actual clinical research around it, NMN and NR have almost identical effects on NAD levels. And they're obviously getting there through slightly different paths, but inevitably both are going to go up regardless of which one that you take. So we chose not to work with the NMN mostly for regulatory reasons, but
Have
we're
you tried
using.
NMN and
I've
nitinamide
tried
riboside
NMN,
and
but I
see
haven't done.
and
I personally haven't done lab testing with it,
okay.
so I've tried it just to notice how I feel, and it, especially when I do high doses, then I do definitely feel a change in sort of energy levels, kind of sense of vitality. Although I
Mhm.
will say, even with our NAD product now, even just taking the standard dose of that without doing like 1,000 milligrams of NMN like I've done, I get more out of it. And
What
actually,
kind of change did you see in your NAD results?
let's see, and I don't remember the most recent with mine. I remember more some of the ones that we just studied. We actually
Okay.
just completed another clinical trial on that, and what we saw there was with people, the average when people were on it for 30 days was a 88% increase in NAD levels, which is
Okay.
huge. Right, the next best thing on the market is a 50% increase.
And that's
So that
what?
that was a big. That would be just straight NR. So there's a number of companies that sell just a straight NR product.
And what does
But
NMN
NR
do,
by
for
its,
example? What percentage does it increase? Straight NM.
the last study I saw in NMN was around a 40% increase.
Okay.
So it was actually slightly less than NR. And then like
So
in our product, what we're doing is we're doing NR, but we're also using niacin and niacinamide. So all
okay.
of the primary precursors to both ramp up the production of NAD. And then we're also including a very low amount of caffeine because it helps to produce more of the enzyme necessary to convert NMN into NAD in the body. And then we're using resveratrol and some other polyphenols to help with the other enzyme productions that are related
Does the
to the conversion
resveratrol, I see there's
process.
50 milligrams of trans resveratrol. Does that help, you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Resveratrol has, there's, I think, if I remember correctly, I think two clinical studies showing where resveratrol will increase the enzymes necessary for basically once NAD is utilized by the body and it turns back into niacinamide, the enzyme
Okay.
then converts it back. And that's why we're including it is it's not just about giving the precursors to make more, it's also about being able to support the enzymatic processes to do the conversions
Mm-hmm.
because with NAD, you have SIN that'll come into the body, which then converts into niacinamide, which converts into NR, which converts into NMID, which then converts into NAD. And then the whole process starts all over again. So it's having those core components, but also making sure that you're supporting the processes by which they convert. And then ultimately, the end output of that is way higher amounts of ATP, which essentially makes everything better. Yeah, I'm really happy with this product. We knew it was going to do more than the other stuff based on a lot of clinical research going into it. To have just finished the clinical trial on that and actually get to see that it's notably more impactful than everything else that's been studied. And like, for instance, now with this one, part of what made it doable is that there's now 2 companies that make at-home NAD tests. Whereas before, if you wanted to do that, we had to have everybody go into clinics and get blood draws. Now that can be done with a finger prick and shipping it in. So when you
Okay.
start
And
to
how
have
many
those kinds of
people were part of the
changes,
trial?
that one was a 50-person study. We have
Okay,
another
that's not bad.
50-person study underway currently, and then we'll probably end up doing a larger one, but that's plenty needed for being able to see statistical significance. Past that is more just that I get excited about doing studies.
Interesting.
Yeah, these are the only 2 clinicals. Like, we've done over 30 pilot studies through the company, but then
That's a lot.
clinicals are, every single product has at least 1 pilot study. Several of them have multiple pilot studies. And now that we're getting a little bit bigger and we have the bandwidth, we're starting to move progressively more into full-scale clinical. Our pilots were effectively clinical anyways, because like we would do the same processes, same controls. We just weren't also filing for the IRBs and doing some of the other things that tend to make it take longer and cost more. But now that we've gotten a little bit bigger and we have that bandwidth, we're starting to do progressively more of that. Yeah, just these last couple months have been super exciting because we had the positive clinical trial come out on the Senolytic product, and then just a few weeks later, the positive clinical on the NAD product.
What was the clinical trial on the Senolytic product? What was the
So on the
outcomes?
Senolytic, we were largely looking at things related to joint health because that's one of the primary issues that are associated with senescent cells. So there, it was the 68% decrease in joint discomfort, 51% decrease in joint stiffness.
But that's joint like knee stuff, or
all joints.
what kind of joints?
In knees, elbows,
Like tendons and
ankles.
joints are different, for example. They're not the same.
So the study format that we use is a study that is traditionally for studying arthritis and the various interventions for it. So you're looking at, it's all joints, but things that are going to be pain, stiffness, inflammation. These are the kinds of things that are being looked at. So it was largely focused on joints. We did also do what's called the RAND SF36, which is a overall quality of life metrics. So that's doing like structured surveying around people's like energy and fatigue levels, around their sense of emotional well-being, their subjective sense of their physical health. And we saw meaningful improvements in all of those as well. But the real standout was the joint health, because there's not much that you come across on the market that can see those kinds of reductions, especially in a very healthy way, right? Like you could do a cortisone injection into your knee and you'd see that kind of improvement, but it would only last for a little while and there'd be other problems associated. So to be able to see that much of a drop in joint problems in a way that is both healthy and sustainable is pretty awesome.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that the whole Senolytics were against joint issues.
There's senescent cells that build up everywhere. Certain tissue types seem to have more buildup than others, and joints is one of the primary ones. At some point, we want to do a study to actually look at the exact reduction in senescent cells, but the only way to do that is through tissue biopsies. And so that's a very invasive kind of study, right? We'd have to do multiple tissue biopsies on each person in multiple tissue types. And that's a lot harder to get people to want to sign up for. At some point, we'll do that study, but right now we're largely looking at all the clinical research to see what are the symptomologies associated with excessive senescent cells, and then doing studies to be able to look at where those symptoms improve.
Interesting. That's really cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. I'll definitely try out. I'm looking at the Qualia Life 2.0, the mitochondria one. That looks interesting.
Mhm. Love that product. I think it's not quite as popular of a product as some of them, but I actually think it's probably quite possibly the best product we've ever formulated, and in my
Okay.
biased opinion,
Which
one
one
of the
is your
best
most
ones.
popular?
Qualia Mind and Qualia Senolytic are two most popular. They're pretty comparable.
Interesting. Okay.
Obviously, very different use cases.
The quality
Mine is
mind,
going to
the
be,
quality of mind is mainly for mood or cognitive function.
it's primarily for cognitive function, but it does do quite a lot for mood as well. Like the main focus in the formulation is improved cognitive function, but you'll see
Mm-hmm.
there's several different ingredients there that are designed for both mood balancing and mood improving.
Okay.
So
Interesting. And
yeah,
you
I mean
take all
that
of your
one.
formulas? You take all
Yeah,
of
I mean
your formulas?
I don't take all of them every day. There are certain ones that are like staples for me that I'm pretty much always on. Uh,
Which ones?
so like Mind, Life, NAD, and Senolytic are ones that I'm super consistent around. We have a skin product which is awesome, but it's not as big of a priority for me. So if I'm not already taking too many other capsules, I take that one.
Right.
If I'm
How
getting
many
to the point
capsules
where I
are
feel
you
like I'm going to
taking
get
now?
nauseous, oh, my number's way lower now. I'm down to probably 60 a day.
Okay.
Um,
All right. Still respectable.
yeah, it's still not trivial, but and I go through phases over the years. Like right
Right.
now, I'm in a phase where I'm focused more on lifestyle and a little bit less on heavy dosing supplements.
Okay.
So I'm putting more emphasis on trying to get really good sleep and do more exercise and clean up diet and things like that. And then I go through phases where I go crazy on supplements, and then I go through phases where I go crazy on really expensive biohacks. Uh,
What?
Recently, I went and did a couple of EBOO treatments. So basically, you go into a clinic and they put you on a dialysis machine that also pumps your blood with massive amounts of ozone. It's equivalent to 50 traditional ozone treatments. And they run your
Okay.
blood through UV light. You're killing off tons and tons of pathogens through the ozone and the UV. And then with the dialysis, you're pulling out all types of inflammatory proteins and heavy metals and other toxins. So it's just like a way to clean your bloodstream.
Interesting. How did
And
you feel from that?
great. It was interesting. Like people asked me how I felt, and the best descriptive word I could come up with was I felt clean inside, which I know is like a
Interesting.
weird thing to say, but yes, I did feel a little bit more energetic. I did feel a little bit more mental clarity, but like the main thing was there was just this sense that my insides got cleaned out. And
So do you still do the IV NADs?
I haven't actually for a little while. I was basically up until we launched our product, then like about once a quarter or so, I would do an NAD IV.
Okay.
Um, at this point, I may still do them here and there, but there's not as much relevance because now I can just keep my NAD levels up consistently, and it's a lot easier. NAD IVs can do so much benefit, but the actual process of doing them is pretty shitty. I don't know if you've done them before, but when you're
Any IV is a little shitty. They just stick a needle in you for a while and
oh, this is a
just
whole different level.
oh, it's a different
I mean, because
level.
like I've done lots of nutritional IVs, and if you're afraid of needles, it's an issue. But like for me, I'm pretty comfortable there. So it's just okay, I've got to sit here for 45 minutes. But with NAD, it's a very long duration. Depending on the dose that you're doing, it's typically between 3 and 8 hours that you're on an IV.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and the whole time that you're on it, you feel a combination of like dizzy and nauseous, but the nausea is not really in your GI tract. It's like your bloodstream feels nauseous.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so it's not a very fun experience. That goes away as soon as you're done, and then you feel awesome. So it's totally worth it. But what I tend to do is I do NAD parties. So like I'll have a group of friends come over, and I have a doctor that'll come over and do us all at the same time. And that way we at least get to hang out in our
Hang out.
misery. Because when you're
Right.
sitting there for 8 hours just feeling like crap by yourself, it's not very fun.
Oh, wow.
When
Okay.
you at least have five or
Interesting.
six
That's a
friends
whole
all
day
doing the
event.
same thing. Yeah,
So you should probably get high while you're doing it or something.
I have done
I
that
don't
as
know.
well. It helps.
Just if you're not doing anything for 8 hours, no, you could watch some TV. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Netflix.
Like the first times I did NAD IVs, I was like, God, I'm gonna be there forever. I'm gonna bring my laptop and get a bunch of work done. And there, with how bad I felt, there was just no way that I could actually focus to get anything done. I ended up watching Netflix the whole time.
Interesting. All right. Awesome. Appreciate the
Cool.
conversation. And where can people find more about you, about the products?
Yeah, best place is to go to neurohacker.com, find out about all the products. All of our studies are published on there. And then I believe we actually have a coupon code for your listeners. If you
All right. Let's
use
do it.
the code self decode when you're in checkout, you'll get an extra 15% off.
All right. Cool. And then I saw the prices. The prices are pretty decent because if you buy them all separately, you're going to pay more. And then
Mm-hmm.
also you have the first month it's like half off or something, right? Or
Yeah.
it's a discount,
Yeah.
big discount.
Most of our customers end up doing subscriptions because they want to stay on the product for a long time. So we have it set up where you get 50% off the first month. That way, there's an opportunity to try it without spending a whole lot before being committed for the
Right.
long term. And then with
And you're
the
saving
self
a lot,
decode
even
coupon, you'll get an extra 15%
another
off on that.
15% off. Now, that's a pretty good deal because
Mhm.
with the 15% and then the first month, and then even if you're like, if you were to buy all them separately and then put them all together and
Oh, then it's much, much more expensive. We've had people go online before and do those comparisons. And, like I think somebody did it with mine one time. And like mine is $150 product. Buying all those things individually was like $700.
yeah, no, I could look at the products I see. It's like buying stuff individually. And then it's also more annoying. You're taking more pills. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's a cool product to try out, and I would recommend people taking the product for a month and then doing NAD lab testing to see what your before and after is. Yeah,
Cool.
it's been a pleasure. Good catching up, and glad
So,
everything's going well. And yeah,
yeah,
best of luck. We'll be in touch.
sounds good.
Thanks
Have a
for
good one,
coming
Joe.
on.
Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye bye. 67% of listeners aren't subscribed to the show, so please don't forget to show your support by hitting the subscribe button now. You'll not only be supporting the show, but also investing in yourself and your health journey, all while helping keep us ad-free.